You have tuned into the TDP videocasts. Sometimes they say that truth is stranger than fiction. Come with us on a ride beneath the surface, plumbing the depths of the arcane. I'm Daniel, the host of the TDP videocasts. Welcome. Welcome to the Damned Podcast. And of course, we just had, as everything seems to happen at the same time, we had a update happen on Windows 10, which of course may affect how things progress here. And I'm hoping that it comes through clearly. And I also hope that the sound issue has been dealt with. Now, the topic that we have today is a very important topic and one that's kind of close to my heart personally. And that is, of course, where the Northern tradition fits in and how does it fit in to the path of darkness. Now, one of the things that's really important in understanding this is the perspective that you come from. Now, one of the things that we're going to be discussing here today, because we could go on for hour after hour with this and still only scratch the surface. I'm hoping that this is coming through okay. There is a chat box there. If there is something that comes up that is an issue, please let me know. And realize as well that once this processes through to our main channel, into the archives, it's not going to be so much of an issue. Now, one of the things that I am trying to get across here is how important it is to understand the perspectives of what the left-hand path, which is a term of convenience, is being meant when I discuss the Northern tradition or any other tradition that's out there. Now, if there's an issue with the video, please let me know. Now, one of the things that is very important in terms of how we understand the power of the left-hand path and the power of the concept of truth and infinity that we've been talking about and building up into throughout the last broadcasts. And this is really important to really bring into bear, because every broadcast that we're doing is building one upon the other. And I'm hoping that this is something that ends up becoming, clearer and clearer to your mind. And I know I kind of seem to be stumbling over my words here right now, but that's because I'm trying to make a point that is so deep that it almost defies the description of words. And I'm hoping that this speaks to your spirit so that there is a connection and an understanding what I'm talking about this. Okay? I used to do seminars in an actual in-person format years and years ago. And I did a seminar that was based on the ancient runes. And this seminar had 4 sections to it, and each one of them was 4 hours long. Now, when I went to do these seminars, I didn't expect anybody to show up, but I ended up coming into this hall and having it standing room only. And these people and others as well that they talked to came to each one of these sessions, 4 hours long or not. I even enforced a 20-minute break because, like I've said before, the mind can only take what the arse can endure. They came back always wanting more I was just shocked. I was floored. And so, I'm not going to put you through that in this broadcast. What I am going to do is casually discuss 3 areas that I think are very important. And if there is interest, I'm thinking of reworking the ancient runes sessions that I used to do and putting them in video format. And if anybody really wants to see that happen, they can message us either at thedamnpodcast@gmail.com or on our website. They can go to the contact form and contact us and just express that, hey, we would like to see something like this done. But today, for time's sake, I'm going to be talking about three different areas. The first is more recent history. And by that, I mean the last 1,000 to 1,500 years or so, the Norse age, the Viking age, and how that relates to the practice of magic and the practice of the runes, because there was more than just the runes in northern magic. There was spay, there was scythe, there was all kinds of oracular work. Some used runes and some did not. I'm not going to go into everything because we would be here forever, but there were many different aspects in the northern tradition that, in spite of the fact that the influence of Christianity was becoming so powerful and so strong, that still preserved a lot of the truth of where its origins came from and how it was used. The second thing I want to talk about is also very important, and that has to do with more ancient history. This is going back further than 2,000 years. This is going back to the archetypal aspects of the gods and where they came from in the mythologies, and how they not only influenced the evolution of the Northern European tribes, but also how they affected the peoples around them wherever they happened to be, whether that it was through war, through trade, through just their presence there. And this is something that I think will be an eye-opener to many people, because so many people just focus on the Viking Age and they don't realize that was the end of the Northern European civilization. It was not the beginning. It was not the middle. There are things that we can take from the ancient past that are not tainted by the JCI, that are not tainted by the monotheistic slave philosophies, and things that can truly be powerful when you understand them and put them into practice. And the last thing I want to talk about, the third thing, is the infiltration, not only in the esoteric and magical aspect of things, but also some of the religious aspects of things, into the Northern European traditions that are very foreign and that come from the JCI itself and come from that influence that has enslaved so many people in the human race on this planet, on this world, depriving them not only of freedom, but of the possibility to grow and to become. So if we discuss these three things, I believe this is going to be successful and it's something that is going to be useful to you. So the first thing we're going to discuss, of course, is the more recent history. So we'll take a look at the Viking Age, and you have all kinds of things that are preserved. The Icelandic Saga database is a great place to find the stories of the ancient heroes and of the gods. Taking a look at some of the things that have been written, the prose Edda and the poetic Edda, and also the different partitions which actually come from that. Everybody that has any experience with the Northern tradition is aware of Voluspa and the Havamal, which are part of the different Eddas. But, they've been separated so that people can actually read them and understand them a little bit better. And, there are many things that are in there that are perfect and strong indications of the alignment that on the esoteric level, the Northern peoples had. It was not the idea that they were somehow like sheep in a pasture waiting for people to save them. It was about people being proactive, walking in freedom, and yes, they screwed up sometimes, but they would make it right and continue pushing forward for expansion, growth, and an increase in power. And this is something that is so important for you to realize. Even though there is a taint, because of the influence that came, again, through trade, through forced conversion, through all the different things that took place during the time when the church was invading the Northern European lands. Now, one of the things that really disturbs me is the idea that the magical practices of the Northern peoples, whether it was runes or scythe, were all the sunshine and rainbows. It was not. Yes, it's true. There were a lot of times that people used the arcane for the purpose of, good crops, prosperity. But that wasn't all that it was used for. It was also used for cursing. It was used for, augmenting the prowess of warriors. You want to know what the magic of the North was used for? Read the Havamal. okay, especially where it comes to the runes. Okay, you read of that famous time where Odin sacrificed himself to himself on the world tree. Now, why did he do that? He did that in order to understand the runes which came to him from the underworld. When he saw the runes after the 9 days and nights, being pierced by a spear hanging on the world tree, he fell down screaming from there into the depths of the underworld, and there he found and mastered the runes. This was, a powerful indication as well of what alignment the gateways of the energies of the universe are with. Think about that for a moment. Right after this experience, we read about the 18 mighty spell songs of Odin. Yes, there are some spell songs that have to do with healing. There are some that have to do with protection. But there are also many that have to do with victory in war, calming flame, stilling storms. One that I want to point out in particular, Odin says, if I see a man dead hanging on a tree, and I carve staves into him, he will come down and speak with me. Well, you know what that is? That's communication with the dead. That's also shown in the rune Evaz in the Elder Futhark. It's shown in the Younger Futhark in the rune Ir, which is the 16th rune of the Younger Futhark, which is a combination of the Elder Elhaz and the rune Evaz. And you see how that touches upon the communication with the dead, which is necromancy. Now, that in itself has always been something that is very much part of what they would call the left-hand path today. In fact, necromancers were feared greatly. Why? Because they communicated with the dead, and they also had the ability to call forth the dreaded Draug, which was the undead warrior, that condemned soul, in order to wreak whatever will the sorcerer or male or female desired to see done. Does that sound like sunshine, rainbows, and unicorns to you? Does that sound like peace, love, and light? No, it was something that was used. And why was that something important to, even in the Norse and Viking age, why was that important to them? Because magic was not only considered something to be a benefit to the people, but also another weapon in the arsenal of warfare. Take a look at some of the things that are very commonly known. Before the start of a battle, there would be somebody that often, not always, but often, would cast a great spear over the host, the enemy host usually. And why would they do that? Well, of course, there's the mythological correlation there of, whenever Odin would hurl his spear, it would start a war. Well, there was also something else that was done, and it is talked about. And that was that the enemy host, through that act ritually done of casting that spear, was being offered as a sacrifice to Odin. Now, think about that for a moment. There is a saga, and I don't have them right in front of me at the moment, but you can find it quite easily. A very famous hero that had a sword that he dedicated to Odin. And one of the things that he said was that every soul that with this sword he cast out of their bodies was a sacrifice to Odin. That was something that was raw, something that was forceful, something that was a putting forth of the will, something that was not being passive, something that was not being stuck in a position where you felt like a victim. It was something where you moved forward and you did what was necessary to do to bring forth the fruit and the result that you desired, that was not only going to be a benefit to you, but also a benefit to your tribe and a benefit to those that were under your protection, or that were going to benefit from the spoils that you brought back from the raid or from the battle. Now, we look at these things and we see the power of them. And it's so ridiculous to think that the runic energies were used just for something fluffy, just for something that really did not have any substance to it. And this is something that a lot of people that follow the right-hand path, and I use these as terms of convenience, because obviously hundreds of years ago, left-hand path and right-hand path were not even terms that people would have been familiar with. There was only power, there was only magic. Now, when we're talking about that today, it's easier for people to understand. But many people on the right-hand path forget the fact that even in the spell songs of Odin, where he's calming the fire with his spell song to rescue somebody from the burning mead hall, or where there is the calming of a storm, or whether there is protection being put forth against a young warrior so that he goes out safe and comes back safe, whether there's even healing being done, do you realize that that is the imposition of will? That is the direct imposition of will to cause change to occur. And on the right-hand path, that's black magic. And yet they're guilty of it all the time. And in their hypocrisy, sit there and look at people on the left-hand path and say, oh, you're so evil and wicked. No. We're just doing what we're doing with our eyes open and understanding that the deceit of the false light and the illusion that it brings is a taint like a fly in the ointment in everything that it touches. And we don't want anything to do with it. And so it's actually more honest. And that's actually something as well that fits into the virtues of the Northern tradition. All right, what is one of the virtues of the Northern tradition that relates to that? Well, courage is one of them, because you have to have courage in order to be able to put your will out there. And also honor. That's an important one, because, in honor, you're being honest with yourself, and you are also keeping your word. Truth. Oh, well. We had a discussion in the Essence of Darkness about truth and how that relates to the infinite. All the rest is truths with a small t. All right? And there's a big difference between the two. So you take a look at the history of the Northern tradition in the Viking Age, and what you see is something that truly is aligned with the left-hand path, as we understand it in that terminology today. And those that do not believe that it is are deceiving themselves. Now, before people get all riled up, if that's where you happen to be, stop and think. Because you do know, if you still yourself, if you still the knee-jerk emotional responses, you do know the truth when you hear it. I've been doing this for 30 years, and I have seen what the fruit of the right-hand path is, and I have seen what the fruit of the left-hand path is. There's no comparison. And people that talk about the left-hand path as though it's this horrible path are people that have basically listen to what others have slanderously told them that it is. And they do not understand. Or they're afraid. Because the truth in infinity is the natural order of things. It is something that is not artificial. It is not something that can be boxed in or limited. And we have hints of this all throughout the multiverse, even here on this planet, in this world, on this plane. Take a look around you. Take a look around you. What happens in nature? All right, I saw an article just the other day that at some point in time, not too long ago, there were wolves that were introduced back into the Yellowstone Park in the United States. They hadn't been there for a long time. And I think it was only 14 or 15 wolves that they put in there, and they actually succeeded, and they've been breeding and so forth. And much of the lush wildlife and vegetation has been coming back because a lot of the prey animals that were overrunning the place were being pushed back because, of course, they were being hunted down by the wolves in the open territory to other places where they could live. And there was a balance that was restored. And actually everything began to thrive in ways that the people that had introduced these wolves to this environment, once again, had never even thought possible. All right, we look at the world around us today. Folks, if you think that that's balanced, I would really like to know what you're on, because I'd like some. There's stuff out there going on that is completely nuts. And there's no way anybody that's watching this today or at any other time can deny that. Just look around you. That's not balance. That is the result of the artificial constructs of the false light and the indoctrinations that they have affecting people, and people identifying with that. And then identifying with that even when they're looking at paths that have freedom in it. Okay, that's like saying, I'm free, I'm free. Let's put my chains back on. Folks, this is dear to my heart because I've seen this and it breaks my heart. Because I've seen people really trying to understand how they can connect with truth and connect with that freedom that comes from the release of the limitations of the false light, and yet they fall back into that dissonance because that's what they're familiar with. That's what they're comfortable with. That's what they've been taught about. And this is why in other episodes I've talked about how important it is, more than any other thing, for the person themselves to develop. You are the most important tool in your arsenal. I don't care what tradition you follow, whether it's the Northern tradition or any other. You yourself must be ready. You yourself must be able to become a conduit. You yourself must have that resonance, or else everything that you have is tainted and it will not do what you think it's going to do. And the same with the runes and with Scythe and Spy and all of the different aspects of Northern magic. Okay? I'm more familiar with the runes than I am with some others, but there is a broadcast that was done on the old channel. We still have it on our YouTube channel today called Scythe, and that's spelled S-E-I-D-H-R. You can find it on there. I encourage you to listen to it because that talks about some of the other aspects of the Northern tradition, kind of lumped under the, Spay and so forth is lumped under Scythe for simplicity's purposes, so that people can understand it and digest a lot more. But it shows a lot of things that are very potent and very powerful. And with the runes, we're looking at the runes now as the gateways, not only an alphabet. Okay, I've had so many people, I'm a linguist, and that was an alphabet they used to write waybills with. Yes, sometimes they did. But one of the things that's a disconnect with us today is the importance that our ancestors put upon the word. Okay? they had great importance on it. If you look at the syntax of the ancient skaldic poetry, you begin to understand the power and the force, both creative and destructive, that our ancestors put upon the word. All right? They didn't even like somebody serenading, like if you were a young man, serenading a young lady, because they thought you might be casting a spell on them, for goodness sake. That's the type of power that they put upon the word. And so when you take a look at the alphabet of the runes, you begin to understand the power in the combinations and in the things that they did with the runes that were there for the purpose of causing change. Now, I'm not talking about memorial stones. I'm talking about actual stones or carvings or inscriptions that were used for direct magical purposes. And yes, there are evidence of many of those. And some of the stones actually still stand in Europe to this day. We need to remember these things and understand that the concepts that we have in our modern society today are not entirely in sync with the concepts that our ancestors had. And this is something that I want to bring into focus in the next point that I'm going to be talking about, but I want to conclude with this point first. Yes, there was a taint, because most of the things that were written that we have available to us were written in the post-conversion period. And I want you to understand why there's a bit of a taint on it, and this causes endless confusion to people, especially those that are following the magical path, because the church at that time was not very tolerant of people who had different points of view. Okay? You know, you could get accused of heresy and be burned at the stake or hanged or drawn and quartered and have all of your works burned. All right? Now, Snorri, when he wrote the Prose Edda, he wrote a lot of things in there that when you understand what the teachings of the accursed JCI are, you can sort of see where it is and where it's not and filter it out, eating the wheat and spitting out the straw. Because there are things that are written in the Prose Edda and in the Poetic Edda and even in the rune poems themselves, although a little bit less tainted there because of the double meanings of some of the words that can be interpreted, because they needed to keep the church happy. Because if they thought they were offending the church, then the things that they were writing were going to be destroyed, obviously, and both they and their families could have severe repercussions. And Snorri was no exception to this. Okay? I believe it was the 12th century that he wrote a lot of that in, between the 12th and the 14th. I have to double check that. But I believe it was the 12th. And the conversion of Europe was done by then. And there was a necessity for there to be an appeasement of the church in writing this. And one of the reasons why Snorri wrote the Prose Edda, by the way, was to preserve, as I've been talking about this disconnect with the understanding of words, the skaldic poetry, because it was, even in his time, slipping away, falling into forgetfulness. The skaldic prose is so powerful. And when, this is why when I've talked to people about performing rune magic, you don't have to be a great poet, but if you have the skaldic style and you've studied enough to understand a little bit of the skaldic style and the misdirection that they have and the deliberate twisting of words, the incantations do something that affect every level of your mind. This is potent. This is powerful. Okay? And something that cannot be forgotten and should not be forgotten. But how does this fit into the path of darkness? Well, the path of darkness, let's just clear this up right away, is not the path of degeneracy. It is not the path of going into some place where, there are no concepts of loyalty and honor. Quite the opposite, actually. It is a path of freedom. It is a path of focus. It is a path where you are breaking free from the limitations of deception and placing yourself in a position of self-purging where you are becoming more and more aligned with the things that bring that freedom, with the spirits that are willing to work with you, and bringing yourself out of that limitation into the natural order where you actually will become something. This is the path of Olthan. Why do you think that he travels the 9 worlds ceaselessly? And you know what? He goes beyond the 9 worlds too. Not so he can sit on his laurels. He does it so that he can always be expanding, so that he can always be growing, so that he can always be becoming. And that is the example for us, if you're on the Northern tradition. Always becoming. But that does not happen when you have the victim mentality. That does not happen when you have the slave mentality. That does not happen, because then you're just waiting for somebody else to vicariously deal with your issues, because you can't do it yourself. I'm sorry if I sound a bit sarcastic, but I've seen this victim mentality so strongly put forth over and over and over again through media, through religious broadcasts, through spiritual broadcasts that are supposed to be teaching people how to move forward. And it is just maddening. All right? If you try to follow the path of darkness with that attitude, guess what's going to happen? One of two things. On the positive side, if there is one, nothing. And then you'll be discouraged because you'll think to yourself, well, it doesn't work. Or secondly, it does work and you break your mind. And that can happen. Infinity, the absolute, darkness, truth with a capital T, will shred limitation. It will destroy it. And if you try to impose that with your mind, I don't care if you're using runes or something else, it will bite you in the ass. You need to work on yourself and understand where you are and come into alignment. And that only happens through dedicated focus and purging yourself from the indoctrinated belief systems that we not only have grown up with. Yeah, listen to or watch that episode we did, Devastating Indoctrination. It'll be something that touches your heart because it's true. All right. It's not bad enough that, we've been subjected to that indoctrination throughout our life, but we're bombarded with it on a daily basis. Every time we listen to a radio station, or every time we watch a television program, or every time we go and hear a commercial, or sometimes even go to a shopping center and you see all the advertisements there. That book that I mentioned in Devastating Indoctrination showed a picture of, it wasn't a TV ad, it wasn't anything radio, it was just a picture. And he showed 13 or 14 different subliminal aspects to that picture that nobody would have ever seen or noticed. We're bombarded constantly. Consume, consume, consume. Be a happy slave. Screw that. And I hope that you'll say that with me. We need to have our minds opened, but that has to come with decision. And looking at the runes, and in the recent history, and by that, of course, I'm meaning, between 1,000 and 1,500 years ago, we understand that even at that point, the magic and the esoteric practices of the Northern tradition would be what we would call in our modern age, left-hand path. No dispute about it. All right, now we take a look at more ancient history. That's the second point I want to talk about, and this is very interesting too, because you see, you go back further than monotheism. You go back further than all of the taint of the JCI. And you begin to see how some of these teachings, and remember, mythologies are not stories that are literally true. They are stories that are told in a memorable fashion in order to convey seed truths across generations. Okay, there was no great cosmic cow with a giant sucking on its teats. All right, if you think that, I've got a bridge in Brooklyn to sell you. Okay, we've got to be logical thinking people too sometimes, and realize that these stories are meant to convey a truth across generations in such a way that it would be memorable, because many things were not written down. One of the things too that is a part of this, that both in the Norse Viking period and also in the pre-monotheistic period, that not only was a part of the Indo-European ancestry, but throughout the world, was something that is often forgotten and not talked about today. And that was the reverence for the ancestors. There was a reverence for the ancestors. Okay? And I'm excluding some, modern groups from the Orient that still have ancestor veneration. But, our ancestors had that too. They revered their ancestors. You want to talk about necromancy in the left-hand path. Okay, this is something that was both in the Norse and Viking age and in further times in the past as well. One of the things that they used to do, this didn't involve runes, but they used to go out and do something called sitting out. They needed advice from their ancestors. They needed a boon from their ancestors. What they would do, and they used to call it in Old Norse, utasita. They would go to a burial mound or to some sort of grave site, and they would sit out there at night until they had a vision from their ancestors. That, my friends, is still necromancy. But here's an example of the taint that happened during the conversion period that I want you to really pay attention to, okay? We know of the being in Norse mythology called Hel or Hela, ruler of the realm of Hell, spelled with one L. And we hear of Hell with two L's, the JCI version that they appropriated. Okay? And in their version, it is a place of damnation and torment and horror and all kinds of things that will never cease, and so on and so forth, and yada, yada, yada. Hell, with a single L, was the underworld. Folks, the realm of the dead. There were many different levels to it, of course, but it was the realm of the dead. In the Norse Viking age, the Norse warriors had a great dread of the goddess Hela. They didn't want to meet her because, again, I believe the influence of Christianity, bringing that and appropriating that. Hey, they used to take temple sites and convert them into churches, for goodness sake. Obviously, they would appropriate as much as they could. A great example of their appropriation is the celebration of Yule. All right, that was one of the highest celebrations at an equinox that our ancestors had, not only through, the Norse period, but long before as well. But now it's Christmas. All right, great example. Easter is another one. The Christians use that to celebrate the resurrection of Christ. But they didn't even change the name of the holiday. Esther was a Germanic goddess of spring, whose sacred animals and objects were rabbits and eggs. Oh. So why is there a wonder that when it comes to some of the more serious aspects of things, that there wouldn't be attempts made in the conversion process to make that seem sinister when you're talking about the underworld? Okay, one of the things that my ancestors had, because of course I come from Saxon ancestry, in the Saxon tribes, especially that were in Frisia and in what is now called Holland, they had a very different view of Hela or Hel than the Viking Norse did. They did not fear her at all. In fact, they called her Frau Hela, Mother Hela. Why is that? Because she was the one that was tasked with taking care of those who died of natural causes rather than as warriors. Oh, that sounds horrible, doesn't it? No, not really. And when you go into the ancient past and you start looking at the roots of the words, Okay? We understand the roots in Sanskrit. Scandinavia itself is a Sanskrit word. Well, let's take the Norse and Northern European term hell, H-E-L, and look back into the Sanskrit for that. Well, what does that come up to? The word halan. And what does that mean? The underworld, the realm of the dead. Take a look at where the Indo-Europeans not only were dealing with raids into northern India, but also into Persia. And what was their version of hell? They called it Arazura. By the way, that was in the far north on snow-covered mountains. And what was that? Not a place of torment and damnation, although there were things there predatory. Like I said, truth is the natural order, not the sunshine and rainbows of the false light. But Aradura, and Halan, and Hell, and all of these different terms were a crossroads of meeting between the living and the dead. Not only for the veneration of ancestors, but for the connection one had with them. And guess what, folks? That's necromancy. All right? And there are many different levels of necromancy as well. I'm not saying that this is the sum total of necromancy. That's not my purview to say. But I will say this. When you're dealing with the dead, you're dealing with necromancy. And that is, in our modern world, left-hand path. Think about it. Hear more than just the words that I'm saying. Hear more than just the things that I'm trying to illustrate here. Because the power of what I am saying is something that I hope that comes through very clearly. And that brings me to something that is a touchy subject for many people within this context of ancient history. Trace the names of our most important gods, if you're in the Northern tradition, back to their origins. Trace them back. Because they didn't just fall out of the sky. Okay? Let's start with Othin. Okay? Modern day, we call him Odin. But the actual pronunciation is Othin. Then you go to Woden. Then you go to Wodan. Then you go to Wotan. Then you go to Wotanas. Well, what was he before that? Rudra, Shiva, Savar or Savar. All right, depending on what part of the world you were looking at. That's pretty powerful. All right. Who was Rudra? Rudra was a ruthless god of war. Shiva. Shiva was more the higher self aspect of Rudra, which kind of gives an understanding to the tale of how Odin sacrificed himself to himself. And it is said in the mythologies that when Shiva opens his third eye, the universe is destroyed. When you take a look at what happened in Persia, you take a look at the ruthless raids for hundreds of years that the Indo-Europeans did into Persia. The greatest generals of the Lord of Darkness, the blackened dragon, Ahriman, were who? Savar, with his two ravenous wolves. Indra, or Andar, who, if you trace the name forward, was Thunor, or Thor. Some of the greatest generals. Even when you take a look at more recent writings, such as the Devil's Quran, which I have shown on some occasions, one of the things that is said, who are the great generals of Shaitan? Well, two of the names that pop up are Indra and Savar. So you start thinking a little bit. And then you look at the northern mythologies, bringing it forward. Who is the only truly immortal being in all of Yggdrasil? Who? It isn't Odin. It isn't Thor. It isn't Freya. It isn't Frey. During Ragnarok, here's the clue. Everything is being destroyed. The final battle is going on, but there is one being that neither Jotun, nor god, nor goddess, nor Einherjar, nor wight, nor spirit even cast a glance at. Nithog, the death serpent, the death dragon, who gnaws at the roots of the world tree. A lot of people give him a bad rap, but my personal thought is that he's actually the one that taught the runes to Odin. And why would an evil dragon take delight in chewing the bones of oathbreakers? Wouldn't he rather welcome them? No. When Ragnarok is over, we are told in the Voluspa, and you can read it for yourself. Don't take my word for things, folks. Read it for yourself. Read it for yourself. After Ragnarok and all the destruction has taken place, Nithog just spreads his wings and flies away, unchallenged. And we look and we see, and this is what I believe, from what I have seen in corresponding things, not only with more recent mythological positions, but with more ancient texts that I've been able to look at, some heresies that have been put forth from ancient belief systems from the Indo-European era, that Nithog is a shadow cast upon the world tree Yggdrasil that comes from the original blackened dragon, the Lord of Darkness himself. Why was he gnawing at the roots of the world tree? To make sure that the world tree did not fall completely into the illusions of false light and limitation. Because he was always seeking to make sure that limitation, which he cannot tolerate, was being ground away. That all of these things are a part of growth and becoming. And we need to understand more than just what other people have told us about what these things are, and start to see with our own eyes. Do not let anyone do your thinking for you. You are not some automaton. Think for yourself. Understand for yourself. Don't let other people tell you what your opinion is. Follow it. Follow it in your heart, in your depths, with the inner beast, with that part of you that is eternal. Which, of course, means nothing if you identify with the illusion. So I'm hoping that this is making sense, speaking to your hearts. I really want to see this useful to you. Now, the last thing I wanted to talk about was what I see in our modern world as something to be very concerned about with the Northern tradition. And I also include the religious side of things in this, not just the esoteric. There is a great deal being imported, and I understand why, because many people have come from the JCI, from Christianity, from different offshoots of it, to follow heathenry or to study the Northern tradition. And the problem is that many of the things that were enslaving to them from the JCI, they have brought with them and reinterpreted in different words and brought these things into the house of the Aesir and the Vanir. And it is like shit. in their sight. All right? Our gods, if you're of the Northern tradition, were never enslaving their folk or their people. That was not their goal. Their goal was to see people become, if they were willing to do what was necessary to make it happen. They weren't going to do it for anybody, but they could certainly help. This is the same in dealing with all spirits that are of the darkness. You need to be willing to listen to their counsel, to be humble enough to realize when you make a mistake, you should own it, to realize that when you catch yourself falling into dissonance, that you own it and do something about it. This is the difference, too, between pride and arrogance. Pride, there's nothing wrong with pride if you are taking it in things that you have done, and also that you are not falling for the trap of sitting on your victories and not proceeding further. It's just as bad to sit on your victories as it is to dwell on your defeats. Acknowledge both of them, defeat or victory, and then move forward. Don't stay in one place or you'll stagnate. You'll fall into dissonance. Move forward. Learn something from the mistake. Learn something from the failure. Learn something from the victory. And don't allow that victory to be twisted into a defeat by the enemies of truth, by sitting on your laurels. All right? But this is the same in dealing with all spirits. I don't care what tradition you're from. And also the reverence for the ancestors. Again, I don't care what tradition you're from. You should revere your ancestors, even if they were jackasses. Guess what? The very fact that they were here means that you're here. Okay? Doesn't mean you have to like them. All right? But at least give some honor where honor is due. You know, if there was one person in your family line that died at a different time, you wouldn't be here. Not in the way that you are now, with the opportunities that are being presented to you right now. So thankfulness, honor and reverence to the ancestors, and also listening to the counsel of the spirits, and understanding that we have the responsibility to follow that counsel. Not that we're bowing down and becoming slaves. No. Because you see, here's the difference. In the false light, you will be told, "Thou shalt not do this. Thou shalt not do that. If you do, you shall be punished." Read the Bible. Read the Quran. Read all these different books that purport to be speaking the truth, which are not worth the paper they're printed on. And you will understand the difference, because the counsel of the spirits of darkness is, do you want to grow? Well, then you need to do this. If you have the right attitude, if you are desiring to be in resonance, you say, yeah, I see the wisdom in that. And you go and do it. Oh, I didn't quite make it. I screwed up somewhere. The spirits answer, yeah, we thought you might. Here's something else that can help you to understand where you made your mistake and how you can move forward. Now go do it. Don't sit there and cry on your beer. Go do it. And having that attitude of humility where, yeah, I'm going to do that. That's vitally important. But also, that is not just humility for the sake of humility. That is also pride in the sense that you take enough pride in yourself and who you are and who you can become, that you take that counsel and you don't only just do it because it was suggested to you, but you do it because you want to do it. And you are committed to yourself enough to be committed to the spirits that are trying to help you. And this is the same where it comes to the gods and goddesses of the North. This is one of the keys to the gift for a gift principle that is shown most powerfully in the Elder Rune Gable, Anglo-Saxon Rune Gifu, which looks like a big X. And we see that also replicated in other runes, okay? The rune Manaz, for instance, in the Elder Futhark, or Dagaz, or Doig, which, of course, is another rune. You see the X in it. And that paradox is the crossroads of connection. It's the crossroads of connection that you need to forge in your own hearts and get rid of the taint of the JCI in your modern practice. Get rid of it. You know what? One of the things that Sam said from his podcast, The Venomous Tongue, and I'll quote him on this, he took a Bible one time and he put a seal on it, cursing it, drawn in his own blood before he ritually burned it. Whoa, that's kind of extreme, isn't it? Well, that indoctrination that has been put into you and put into me and put into most people in this world is so strong. You want to get rid of it and make that break from everything to do with it so that you don't find yourself falling into dissonance, so that you don't find yourself being corrupted and poisoning your mind and mental processes with endlessly, conflicting with the viewpoints inside. It's an act that has such a symbolic significance equal to the actual magical significance of doing such a thing. It's as much for you as it is to spit in the face of the celestial powers, the powers of the false light. We are not meant to be the way society has programmed us to be. You have the potential to be more than that, my friend. I don't care who you are. I don't care where you are. You have the potential to be so much more than that. And if you move forward, you will. But you need to be committed to yourself and to the spirits that are trying to help you, and that includes your ancestors. And if you're on the Northern tradition, that includes the gods and goddesses. That includes the runes. That includes all of the aspects, not to try and recreate a world that hasn't existed in 1,000 years, but to create something that's living, relevant, and breathing right now. Right now. So the question that was originally postulated by this broadcast was, how does the Northern path or the Northern tradition fit into the path of darkness? With what I have been talking about throughout this broadcast, I ask you, and I want you to think about it, how doesn't it? All right? Forget about the things that you've heard. Forget about the things that you've been told. Forget about some of the legitimate wingnuts that are out there on the internet that are basically just an embarrassment to themselves and everybody else. Look at the infinite nature of truth. Look at the darkness and the unknown. Look at the challenge that is before you. and get away from the victim slave mentality and set yourself forward to become. Please don't let yourself be derailed. Focus. When you fall down, get back up again. Never give up. Keep on going, always. And the time will come. And realize that time is a construct, but I use it for the sake of understanding. The time will come in your perception, perhaps more accurately, where you will break through and you will achieve apotheosis. You will achieve that growth and that connection. Now, with that, I want to make a final announcement before I close off this broadcast, and that is that on the 22nd, which is tomorrow, in the evening, the final session of Meditations in Darkness is going to be released. Now, this meditation is different than the other two, and it is one that I strongly suggest, because of the fact that it is very intense, that you go through the first two sessions before you attempt to go through the third. Because when you enter into the third meditation, it is something that puts you in the position of being an active participant, not just a spectator. And you will be observed by the spirits. And this is something that, I really want you to take seriously. Also, watch the teaching session, probably more than once before entering into that meditation. The other thing, too, is that with that meditation, there's going to be 2 unguided audio tracks included with it. Because, like I said, I want to work myself out of a job. Those 2 unguided tracks are for you when you feel strong and confident enough to design your own meditations, still having all the technology, but not having my voice or anybody else's voice sitting there trying, doing this or that, but making something that you've struck out on your own with. That's going to be included with that. And I am delighted when I hear that people have reached that stage, because you know what? When you're practicing the arcane, you are never truly, practicing to your best potential if all you're doing is following what somebody else does. You need to become original in the way that you process information, in the way that you connect with the ultimate absolute. You need to have that expression come forth from you. And that's one of the things that I, both with the Northern Meditation Bundle and with Meditations in Darkness, is a goal that I have put forward out there, because I want to see you become. I want to see you grow. So be looking for that. It'll be put on our website in the evening tomorrow, which is the 22nd of May, 2017. And, of course, there will be posts made on our social media platforms when that is available, because realize it does take time to process to our server. I want to thank each and every one of you for taking the time out of your evening to watch this broadcast. I hope it is something that is spoken to your heart, because that was the biggest intent that I had with this broadcast. I hope that the video quality was okay. Please give me your feedback on that, because there's still more things I can tweak. As I said, Windows 10 updated itself with some major update right today, so I don't know how that's affected things. So let me know, because I can do a lot of other things to try and make things better. I want to be continually improving. Please feel free to share our website, to share our Facebook page, to share our broadcasts, embed them on your websites. Do whatever you feel you can do to spread the word, so that more and more people can hear this broadcast and resonate with a message that I'm trying to put forth out there. I want to thank you, and I hope sincerely that you have a great week ahead of you. I am Daniel, the host of the Damn Podcast, signing off on May 21st, 2017. Hail.